Throughout your professional career, you might have developed really sharp critical thinking and analytical skills that you use to great effect in your work. But what happens when you inadvertently start using those skills in the wrong place? In this podcast episode, we're going to find out what happens when you turn those skills on yourself.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.
Welcome to episode 105 of the Confident at Work podcast. Today, we're talking about using those sharp analytical and critical thinking skills, which you probably have had to develop over the course of your career, in the wrong way. We're going to look at what happens when you turn those critical thinking and analytical skills on yourself and what you can do to change it. I know, because I used to be a lawyer, that the years of education, the years of training, and the years of being in a competitive professional field require you and train you to be very analytical and very critical in your thinking. That is part of the requirement of your job. But here's the catch. Nobody in all those years of university, schooling, training, on the job development probably taught you that those skills should come with a warning. Caution, do not use these skills on yourself. Today, I'm going to introduce you to a former client of mine, Janet. That is not her real name, but she kindly gave me permission to share her story with you, which I originally sent a little while ago as an email to my community. It sparked quite a bit of discussion, so I decided to do a whole podcast episode about it. So, Janet, that's what we're calling her, is one of my lovely lawyer clients, and she was sent to me by her organization. She works in the City of London, she works at a corporate firm, and she is fairly senior. Like most lawyers, maybe like you, over the years, she's developed really well honed critical thinking and analytical skills. And her clients love her for it. She's gone through law school, she's gone through years of training, she's built her professional expertise, she's built up her reputation in her particular specialism. So by this point, of course, she's very analytical, she's a very critical thinker. And the way she puts it is that she can spot a problematic clause in a client's contract at 20 yards. Her analytical and critical thinking skills make her really good at her job. But there's a catch for Janet, because while she's been busy over all of those years, all of that training, all of that on the job development, honing those skills for her work, she's also been applying them to herself. And that's the reason she's ended up at my door. She came to me because she did not have the professional confidence that she thought she deserved based on her years of expertise, all the evidence that her clients loved her and she was doing very well in her job. And in fact, she'd just been promoted again, which is why her firm sent her to me. Nobody else had a problem with what she was doing, but she didn't feel as confident as she wanted to. And she actually felt like it was getting worse, not better. And what did we discover? Well, it became fairly evident fairly early on that Janet was using those skills, those analytical and critical thinking skills, on herself. And it was destroying her confidence. So when she applied those skills to her work, it meant that she did really well. She had really good outcomes for her clients, her firm loved her. But when she applied those skills to herself, she became anxious, worried. It eroded her confidence. She became someone who was over preparing, over checking, over ruminating, doubting, comparing. And all of that, of course, was a very difficult environment for her to work in. Now, albeit that environment was being created on the inside for her, she still had to work in it day in, day out. And when she did, it was eroding her confidence, which is why she'd ended up with me. And part of the reason that I want to talk about this issue on the podcast is I've worked with many professionals, this is not just Janet, who are really analytical and have really developed critical thinking skills and are using them willy nilly on themselves. And it is damaging their confidence, if not destroying it. But I don't think this is an issue that people talk about. I don't even know if it's an issue that most people notice. I certainly don't think it's an issue that your university are going to warn you about, or your training provider, or your firm's career progression pathway. So I guess that today that's my job to help you think about whether your developed critical and analytical thinking skills are being used in the wrong place, just like Janet's were. So I wanted to give you a few examples of where Janet noticed she was using those skills in the wrong place. So first example is she'd learned to be hypercritical, which she said was great when she was negotiating a contract or scrutinizing something from her opponent. She would fixate on every inconsistency or flaw, every potential area of risk, and she would work to make that right. Close loops, get everything perfect. Great for work. But what happened when Janet was applying that skill to herself? Now she's hypercritical about every inconsistency, every potential flaw, and every potential risk when it comes to herself. Imagine working under that kind of environment. Someone hyper fixating and being hypercritical on any potential flaw or failing or problem. It's not exactly going to buoy you up. It's not exactly going to support you developing a really secure foundation for professional confidence. It's going to make you anxious. It's going to make you worry, and it's going to undermine the foundations of your professional confidence, which is exactly what it did for Janet. She was starting every single day hyper vigilant, doubting every move, worrying about every email, and ruminating over every task that she'd done. When she applied those skills to her work, it made her really good at her work. When she applied those skills to herself, it made her really bad at her confidence. I know that's not a proper way of saying it. But this was Janet's reality. So, despite doing really good work, she was hypercritical about herself, about her work, about her value, about the contribution that she was making. And that was leading to endless rumination, anxiety, worry, overworking, over perfecting to try and make up for everything that she saw that was wrong, that really wasn't wrong. The next example that Janet noticed was she was really good at analyzing everything. Fine detail analysis. She can fine detail analyze a 100-page document, no sweat. She can also, and she was also, analyzing with fine detail every conversation, every email, every contribution, even before it left her mouth. That kind of fine tooth comb analysis was amazing for the work that she did, for pouring through a 100-page contract. It was not great for analyzing everything that she did, every contribution she made, every point that she thought she would share, every opinion she had, every email she was writing. When she applied that skill of fine-tooth comb analysis to her work, brilliant. When she applied it to herself, terrible. It led to a lot of self-doubt, a lot of procrastination, a lot of overworking, a lot of over-preparing, a lot of over-checking, and that was before things were done or said. And then after things were done or said, it led to post-match analysis. So a lot of fine-tooth comb analysis of what happened with that piece of work. Was that right? Did they mean that? Should I have said that? Should I have said it like that? Now, this might feel like an extreme example, but I think a lot of professionals do this. Maybe you do this if you're listening to this podcast. Maybe your powers of analysis, like Janet's, are really strong for your work, but maybe they're also really strong for you. So if you're going over everything you do and say with a fine-tooth comb and looking for potential problems, you may find them even if they're not there. And even if they're not there, going over them, the act of going over them and analyzing and reanalyzing everything, you know, if you're doing it, is utterly exhausting. And even if you don't find the flaws and the inconsistencies, it will start to damage and erode your confidence. How could it not? Imagine if after every piece of work you did, somebody subjected it to an awful lot of scrutiny and went through it to try and find everything that was wrong. Even if the person never really found anything that was that wrong, you'd still end up like a nervous wreck. And if you're over analyzing everything before and after you do it, like Janet was, you're going to find too that it is nerve inducing and it is exhausting. And eventually, like Janet, even if you are really good at your job and you're doing really well, you're not going to feel as confident as you want to. The other thing that Janet identified was that she held extremely high standards for the work she did for clients. So she would want to produce documentation that was of the highest possible standard, every I dotted, every T crossed, great for her clients, and her firm loved her for it. But when she subjected herself to that same kind of scrutiny, not so good. She worked in an imperfect system like we all do, with imperfect resources and lots of things to do. Her standards for herself were so high, they were impossible for her to meet. And she actually said it didn't really matter how well she did and how much she achieved. The way the bar was set meant she could never even reach it. And what happened when in her mind she didn't reach it was that she then went into self criticism, self doubt, comparison, negative feedback, and that whole sorry loop just continued. So, whilst it might be great to have very high, very exacting standards for the work that you do, and you may have had that trained into you by your schooling, by your training, when you apply that same standard to yourself, you're probably going to find that you fall short somewhere, somehow. And unless you have a soft landing place at that point, i.e., unless you're going to say, do you know what? You didn't meet that 120% standard because you're a human and you're working in an imperfect system and you'll do better tomorrow and let's just carry on. If that's not the kind of environment that you work in, even if it's on the inside, if you work in a, you didn't meet this exacting standard 120% the entire time, and therefore you're a piece of shit that shouldn't even be here, imagine what that's going to do to your confidence. Imagine what it did to Janet's confidence. She even laughed a lot during our sessions because it became so abundantly clear to her why she was struggling with her confidence. Because to be honest, when she came, she had no idea why. She was doing a great job according to everybody, but she didn't believe it. She felt like a nervous wreck. It became pretty obvious to her pretty quickly as to why. And I'm sure listening to this episode has become pretty clear to you why she was being hypercritical of everything she did. She was analyzing to the nth degree everything that she did and or didn't do. And she had the most perfect and exacting standards, which no human being could meet, even her, who met pretty high standards nearly all of the time. All of those things made Janet really good at her job. All of those things meant that she'd got promotions, that her firm loved her, that her clients loved her, people trusted her. But all of those things applied to her meant that her confidence ended up in the bin. But it's good news because we resurrected it. We got Janet's confidence out of the bin, we dusted it off, we put it back inside her where it rightfully belonged, and she is now a former client. And I'm making that sound really easy. It did take a bit of work. So, what can you do if you, like Janet, may have been applying those same kind of skills that you use to make you really good at your job and misapplying them by using them on yourself? Analyzing, over analyzing, being hypercritical, being hyper perfectionist. Guess what? Janet found out she could keep using them on her work and stop using them on herself. She thought that once one was gone, it would be gone for everything. But good news, she found out that it wasn't. She didn't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. She could still be really analytical when it came to a contract. And she didn't have to be so analytical when it came to a 5-line email that she was writing to her partners. She could still be hypercritical about clauses in a client's contract, But she didn't have to be hypercritical about her own value and expertise. She could still be perfecting about some of the work that she did, but she didn't need to be perfect. So, what can you do if you're like Janet and you've been maybe inadvertently using those critical and analytical skills on yourself? Maybe you've been taking apart every contribution you've made, second guessing every piece of work, going over every email, noticing every moment of your day. Well, how much is it eroding your confidence to work in an environment where you're subjected to that kind of scrutiny? And if you don't really like what you see when you answer that question, there's good news, just like there was for Janet. If you can see it, at least you have the opportunity to decide what happens next. If you notice that throughout your entire career, you've been fine tooth comb analytical, hypercritical, and totally perfectionist, not just about your work, but about yourself, what would you like to have happen next? The choice is yours. You may decide that now you know you're doing it, it's fine, and you'd like to keep it. But you may also decide that you would like to do something differently. And if you would like to do something differently, knowing is the start. Getting the information and doing like an intake of where you're using those professional skills on yourself is really helpful. But information's one thing. Actually changing it, transformation, is different. Once Janet knew she had the information, but until she had the transformation, she wasn't able to start growing and developing that professional confidence that she actually deserved. She needed to transform the way she was relating to herself. The boss that she had in her head, the standards that she had, she couldn't do that without noticing first what they were. So that's the first thing, information. And the second thing is transformation. Maybe that takes a decision about what you will and will not subject yourself to in the future. And I think it's a good idea to decide intentionally what you will subject yourself to and what you will not. You've maybe been using those same habits of being hypercritical or analyzing every move or perfecting every single thing about yourself for years. It's going to take a little bit of work to transform those habits into something new. Once you have the information that it's happening, maybe you could make a decision about what you would like to have happen next. And in order to do that, you might have to really understand what the impact is on you of living under that kind of scrutiny. You're like the 100-page contract, which is being subjected to hypercriticism, analysis after analysis after analysis, pulling apart, perfecting. A 100-page contract doesn't much care, but you do. So if this is you, I hope this podcast maybe awakens something in you. Maybe this could be the start of a transformation like it was for Janet. And if you would like my help to do this transformation, click through to the link in the show notes now, tap on there and book a call with me to explore private coaching. Until then, thank you for listening. Give us a review if you enjoyed the episode, and I will see you next week. Bye.
Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident. Confidence, confidence, confident. I can be confident at work.